New here at 5, surveillance video captures the moment a convicted murderer escapes through the roof of a Pennsylvania prison's exercise yard.
New video revealing how those two convicted killers broke out of a maximum security prison in upstate New York back in June.
From secret tunnels to hijacked planes, their audacity will leave you speechless. Don't miss out on the unbelievable stories of how they outsmarted the law. The world's most sophisticated prison break. In 2015, one of the most notorious escapes in prison history took place. Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, the infamous Mexican drug lord, was locked up in a maximum security prison called Altiplano. But El Chapo was not just any prisoner, he was a master of escape. And this time, he had a plan that would shock the world. Under the guise of a routine inspection, Guzman's men had already set up a plan to break him out. It wasn't a simple break. It was a 1.5 kilometers long tunnel that led directly into his prison cell. The tunnel was so advanced, it had ventilation, lights, and even a motorcycle to transport Guzman. The ingenuity of the escape shocked authorities worldwide. The tunnel, which began in a nearby house, was dug with precision, and the escape was flawless. When El Chapo made his way through the tunnel, the guards had no idea. As he climbed out of the hole in the floor of his cell, the escape became reality. It was hours before anyone realized he was gone. The authorities were left scrambling to figure out how such an elaborate plan was put into action under their noses. But El Chapo wasn't free for long. Just 6 months later, he was recaptured by Mexican authorities. However, the escape remained a symbol of just how far criminals will go to escape the law. The El Chapo Tunnel remains one of the most extraordinary prison breaks in history. The Great Escape of Frank Abagnale. In the early 1960s, Frank Abagnale, a master of deception, became infamous for one of the most daring escapes in criminal history. Abagnale, still a teenager, was already a skilled con artist, but his escape from a U.S. federal prison was a story of sheer audacity. At the time, he was serving a 12-year sentence for fraud and identity theft. However, using his sharp wit and ability to manipulate situations, Abagnale had a plan. While being transferred from one prison to another, he convinced the authorities that he was an undercover prison inspector working for the FBI. He even went as far as to impersonate a federal agent and presented fake credentials. His charm and confidence were so convincing that the guards allowed him to walk right out of the prison. For months, he remained free, even managing to fake his way onto an airplane as a co-pilot. His story made headlines and added to the myth of the great escape artist. It wasn't until 1969 that he was eventually caught and returned to prison. But his escape tactics and ability to manipulate the system left law enforcement scrambling for answers. Frank Abagnale's escape became a textbook case of the lengths to which a criminal could go to exploit loopholes in the system. His story would later inspire the hit movie Catch Me If You Can. Prisoner impersonated an officer to escape. In 1997, a daring escape took place that stunned prison authorities across the world. Randy, the prison guard O'Neill, a seasoned inmate serving a lengthy sentence, pulled off one of the most audacious prison breaks by impersonating a prison guard. His plan was brilliant in its simplicity and boldness. O'Neill, who had spent years studying the guards' routines, acquired a uniform and even forged the necessary identification to blend in. He meticulously studied the behavior of the real guards and mimicked them down to the smallest detail. On the day of his escape, he walked confidently through the prison halls, pretending to be a guard on duty. No one suspected a thing. He passed through several security checkpoints without raising any alarms. Once he reached the prison's outer wall, he managed to escape by blending in with a group of staff members. It was only after he had successfully fled the prison that the authorities realized they had been duped by a prisoner dressed as a guard. His escape shocked the system, as it highlighted just how vulnerable the most secure prisons could be when an inmate has enough time and intelligence to manipulate the system. Despite being on the run for several months, Randy O'Neill was eventually captured, But his prison break remains a testament to the creative ways criminals can exploit weaknesses in security. Convicted murderer hijacked a plane for freedom. In 1972, a criminal mastermind pulled off a daring escape that would leave authorities and the public stunned. John Watowicz, a man with a criminal record, became infamous for his high-stakes plan to escape prison by hijacking a plane. His escape was bold, desperate, and filled with shocking twists that would make any Hollywood thriller seem tame. Watowicz, along with two accomplices, planned to execute a bank robbery in New York City. The robbery itself was chaotic and far from perfect, but the real shock came after they were cornered by the police. With law enforcement closing in, Watowicz and his partners decided that they had nothing to lose. Instead of surrendering, they seized control of a nearby TWA flight. The hijacking wasn't just about escape, it was part of a larger, desperate plot. With a gun in hand, Watowicz and his crew took control of the plane, demanding that the authorities arrange a getaway. Their demands included $1 million in cash and a flight to a country that didn't have extradition treaties with the United States. The plane was set to fly, and Watowicz was determined to use the aircraft as his ticket to freedom. But the situation quickly spiraled out of control. The flight was grounded after the authorities surrounding the airport refused to meet the criminals' demands. Watowicz had hoped to escape with the ransom money and start a new life, but the reality of the situation set in. As the standoff wore on, tensions rose, and after several hours, the hijackers were captured. Watowicz was sentenced to prison for his involvement, but his daring hijacking and subsequent escape attempt by plane remained one of the most audacious acts in criminal history. His story even inspired the film Dog Day Afternoon, which portrayed his desperate bid for freedom. Though his plane escape ultimately failed, it left a lasting impression on both the public and law enforcement. Inmates used a helicopter to escape in Quebec. In 1978, an escape plan so bold and elaborate took place that it seemed like something straight out of an action movie. Michael Vaujour, a French criminal, managed to pull off one of the most dramatic prison escapes in history using a helicopter. His story would go down in criminal folklore as a brilliant high-risk maneuver that stunned the authorities. At the time, Michael Vaujour was serving a 25-year sentence at the La Santé prison in Paris, a notorious maximum security facility. He was known for his intelligence and resourcefulness, and he had been planning his escape for years. His idea? To use a helicopter to break out of the prison and fly to freedom. Vaujour meticulously planned every detail. He had inside help from his wife, who was involved in the plot. She arranged for a helicopter to be flown to the prison, and on the day of the escape, she contacted the helicopter pilot, who was waiting outside the prison grounds. Vaujour, dressed as a prison officer, slipped out of his cell and made his way to the roof, where the helicopter awaited. The authorities were completely caught off guard. No one suspected that a prison break of such magnitude was even possible. The helicopter hovered over the prison's roof, and Vaujour made a daring escape as he climbed aboard. Within moments, he was airborne, leaving the prison and the authorities scrambling to figure out what had just happened. The escape shocked the nation. It was one of the most daring, high-profile prison breaks ever attempted, and it put a spotlight on the vulnerabilities of even the most secure prisons. However, just a few months later, Vaujour's freedom was short-lived. He was eventually recaptured after a long manhunt and returned to prison. Despite the recapture, his helicopter escape remains one of the most extraordinary and shocking breakouts in criminal history, proving that with enough determination and creativity, even the most secure prisons are not safe. If you thought these escapes were jaw-dropping, wait till you hear about the secret codes criminals use to communicate in plain sight. You won't want to miss it. Hit that subscribe button now, so you never miss an incredible story. Join us for more shocking tales every week.